Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for joining us on another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. As always, I'm your host, Chris Trommer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sal Huerta. We're doing another recap. We've had the last 3 episodes. We're running to the end of June at this point. And, we've talked about price files with Brian, why it's important for the distributor to have those properly populated and sent over to pricing services like NetPricer. Talked to Paul from procurement about his relationship with estimators and how they work in tangent to put these estimates together and making sure they're as strong as possible. And then we got some insight from Sherilyn on why databases are the way they are, why they were created with the products they have in there. And you and me talked about how contractors can actually customize these databases to their speciality or to what they really want to use or see or however it may be. So that makes it easier for them. What I thought about today was the manufacturer. About a year or so ago, had been doing small videos for our manufacturer partners about a program we do called Bid Advantage. It has 3 different parts. Lookout basically tells them, hey, these are the products we're finding in the top 8 estimating databases. There's obsolete replacement where they can remove the products from these databases in place of new products. Because as we've discussed, some of these databases are 10, 20 years old and have never really been cleaned up or taken care of. And the third part was populator. And that was something that struck a chord with me when we were talking before Sherilyn was the populator part. Because we talked a lot about how contractors can get their products that they need into these databases and customize it. But with populator, it turns into the manufacturer side. It allows the manufacturer to send over products to, Electric Smarts that then gets sent down to the contractor estimating software to be uploaded into their database. I guess allowing them a new set of products, newer products, let's say. I mean, would you agree some of these databases they're just old? Would that be accurate? Because I think you mentioned in the past, this is not a database company. This is, a software company.
So the one thing you have to keep in mind is that even if a software company, an estimating software company has a database and the customer purchases it, the customer might not have made almost no changes to it. It's just a stat. And so because of that, the database gets older and older and older. Now, granted, it's updated, it has all the latest prices and so forth, but it might not be customized as we talked about in episodes past. Sherilyn, in one of her interviews with us, had mentioned that there was no rhyme or reason as to how these estimating packages pick manufacturers and so forth to be a part of these databases. So it's very important if a manufacturer wants to have their items spec'd to have their items in these databases.
Now, I've run some of these reports and we find they have varying amounts. And I think we discussed this before. 3 of the databases can have 0 products. One can have 1,000. One can have 10. One can have 13. So there's, as we discussed, no rhyme or reason of why they are developed the way they are, because there's so much discrepancy between each individual database. And we've talked that they do updates, but they're not going through and removing obsolete products. I mean, we've gone through before and somebody had 1,000 products in one database and we found that 500 of them were all old obsolete products from, 20 years ago that they're not even using. I mean, how much better would these databases be if they are being continually updated and cleaned up for the contractor with manufacturer input?
100%. Directly to your point, older products do reside a lot in these systems because they're not, as we said, they're not really monitored. It's basically, here's a database, you manage it, you maintain it, Mr. Contractor. For estimator, he might bring in new items or items into a database of products that he's working with, but the old ones kind of still stay there. And then from the manufacturer side, they might have had the next latest and greatest product that replaces that. But because that's not being mentioned to the contractor doesn't even know this stuff, that's why he doesn't have that. Well, let's remove the old one and add the new one kind of thing.
Or still using a competitor's product because they might know that manufacturer A's product's been obsolete for 5 years, so they're just going with B. And, if they're being mentioned in the bid, then there's a greater chance that they could be there come time for, as Paul put it, procurement. When they're looking over these for purchase, if they do win the bid, they go, okay, what did the estimator have in here? So it seems like it'd be quite important for these manufacturers to actually be taking a hands-on approach to proactively getting their products into these databases, knowing their presence in this space, as much as it's important for the contractor to be taking the proactive steps to customizing some of these databases that they receive.
So everyone understands that having your products spec'd is probably the best way to have your products into a job. And the second way is having your products actually in the databases where the contractor estimator can pull them into a job. Like you said, if it's not there, it might bring in their competitor, or it might just he's going with whatever he remembers, and
Mhm.
it's not being the actual one that the because you're not in the game, so to speak. The manufacturer would be the one losing out.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to somebody and we were talking about the Bid Advantage program, and they said, well, we put some effort into, these engineering programs to make sure we're spec from the get go. And I was like, okay. And I was like, but what happens if you're not? What's your next step to try to get your products in here? And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, technology wise, okay, you didn't get spec even though you had your products in the engineering side. That project is going to end up in an estimating software to an electrical contractor, because most mid to size commercial reno jobs, residential, schools, house, they're all going to go through there. Some guy's not standing out there at the curb looking at a building and walking through and writing down a pen and paper. They're using the estimating software. So if you're not getting in on one, you should be doubling up your efforts to make sure you have the chance at number two, which would be the estimating software. So making sure your products are available there for choosing and to get the attention is, I feel, like you said, the next logical step.
Cheryl Lynn has been an industry expert for many, many years, and she said it perfectly. Where she said, if a lot of time they create what's called an assembly, and that's where you add 4 or 5 or 6 pieces together to create one assembly. So when you're looking to create this part of the job, you just click on that one assembly and it backfills all these items for you. Well, you can't be in those assemblies if you don't have your items into that database.
Yeah.
So it is
So there-
important for them to be not only spec but to be able to have them in the database so that way when an estimator is creating these assemblies, your product's there now.
that's very well put. And to continue that conversation, I mean, talking about the price files with Brian before, I mean, there's something else where I discussed this in the past, and it seemed like a missed opportunity as well. Because say you are now a manufacturer with your products in these databases, you just came out with this great receptacle. It's going to save 30% installment time in every single one of them, right? And I've seen some manufacturers roll these products out that recently watched the videos. They look amazing, but first step, you have to make sure your product's going to be in the database for somebody to actually choose it to get in there. So say they do. Well, the next step is, the estimator is going to create this out. They need pricing. We've talked about pricing a million times over. They click that button to say net price or to get some pricing from their distributor. Well, if their product isn't in that price file that the distributor is sending over to net pricer, we're basically saying, okay, the distributor doesn't carry that product. So we're going to have to swap that out with a like-minded product that might be that same manufacturer, or it might be a competitor. So, I mean, it seems like logical step would be, number one, get into those engineering programs, step one, so you can start at the very top and then work your way down, estimating software. And then if you're a regional guy working with the distributors you're going to see to make sure that all of your products are being featured in these price files. Because as you said, some price files are 500 products, some have 10,000.
Exactly correct. And like I said, the distributors days are doing a lot more customization for these files for their customers. Again, some does hospitals, some do football stadiums, that kind of thing, to where the product choices of what they have are going to be different. But to your point, that's where you need to have more than one avenue as a manufacturer to have your products in these things.
Yeah. So it seemed like if I'm a manufacturer and I'm talking to my regional guys, I'm going to make sure that when they're out visiting with reps and going to these distributors, that you're asking about the price files that they're providing. You're asking, hey, are you connecting with particular contractors with pricing service like NetPricer? And if they're saying yes, it's saying, okay, well, how many of our products are included? Because if they're telling you 20 of your products for this contractor and you have 1,000 products that are sitting at this distributor, there might be some holes. There might be some missed opportunities where you're getting swapped out when pricing's happening for a competitor. So it seems like it definitely would be the next step down of I'm a manufacturer trying to get into more projects from the beginning, utilizing technology where it is. It's just restating the facts. Engineering software is going to be number one. Bid advantage with electric smarts, getting your products into the database, would be number two. And number three is footwork with your regional guy saying what price file products are getting sent over to a pricing service that's connecting to the contractor. Because you could be missing out on a lot. I mean, I've seen numbers before where we're swapping in products for manufacturers at a tune of like 100 million a year. Well, that's a big number if you're getting your products swapped out on the opposite side. Because if we're swapping them into somebody's getting swapped out, and that's only
Mhm.
occurring. We don't have a price file from the distributor for those products. So I would say, get up there, get in front of them and start asking about it. Do you feel like price files might be something that's very much overlooked from the manufacturer because it's not something that they're used to knowing about or discussing, and it's something that pretty much just occurs internally with a distributor to a pricing service?
Well, I think Brian from Kendall Electric said it the best. There's a number of different steps to okay a customer, so to speak. Then afterward, the back end stuff is where they're starting to pull together this information, all these tens of thousands of items for this file. That's the time when a manufacturer needs to be close to their distribution partners to say, okay, when your next update comes or the next thing you're sending out to that customer, do you have our latest item in there?
Yeah.
Is there a way for you to let them know that we're adding this latest new item in there? Bid Advantage program that you talked about is a very high level program that's going to allow a manufacturer to do these things. I think you ran into it in a situation once where you might have been talking to a manufacturer who said he tried to go directly to estimating software packages, and that wasn't successful. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, it was, and it's not just one, it's a few that have echoed the same thing. I mean, there's 8 top estimating software that are out there. So you got 8 databases. So they had a guy that was in marketing, product marketing, started reaching out and saying, calling these places like, hey, love to get a sense of how many products you have in your database, see if we can get some more of our products in there. One or two of them were like, no, this is our database, this is our thing, no outside influences. Couple others were like, sure, but it's going to be a fee. And the fees were ranging from, I mean, not so bad. It's not going to break the bank to where it was a pretty penny that they wanted. And then they found the ones that they actually could be working with at the same time. All the data that they needed to send over, all these fields were all completely different for each single one of them. So somebody would have to go down and work through a spreadsheet of how many products they're going to be sending over for each individual one. Now they're going to have to send it over to them. And as you mentioned in the past, it could go over there and be in a to-do list for, the next 6 months because it's not necessarily something the estimating software cares about immediately. So it gets on that to-do list. But then at the same time, some of them weren't getting insight into what products were already in their databases. So yeah, they were paying to get new products, but they might just be putting new products on top of obsolete products and never getting the obsolete products out. So they weren't really honing these databases. So it really felt like after talking to, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 different people that were experiencing the same thing, that it was going to take somebody like a full-time person to corral this whole thing, like herd these cats and get everything up and running and understand what needs to be done with who. And as you and me both know, working within a digital software kind of company, nothing ever goes smoothly.
Mhm.
So, there's going to be back and forth at some point. So it really was going to be this centralized person. And they were like, do we want to pay all these fees to the software companies? Are we going to have to invest in another person to come and work through this project on however long it takes? But then, like you've mentioned, okay, so it takes you a year. You got these products in. That's great. Well, what happens next year? You can't just leave it alone. That's why a lot of people are the places they are, why they have 500 obsolete products in one database, because nobody looked at it. They left it alone for 5, 10, 15 years. So what happens next year? Are you going to be having somebody there watching, or the year after the year? So it's just a reoccurring cost that's going to continue happening year after year just to now babysit this. And how much you're going to have to pay if you do come out with 10 new products, 15, 20 to get into this database.
Yeah. Also, to your point, it's not just adding an item. We talked earlier about the assemblies. If the assembly
Yeah.
has the old item in there and nobody goes and swaps out the old item for the new item, new item for the old item, then you have an item now floating around the database that's newer, better, saves labor all this time, but it's just floating around. It's not attached to anything. So, it's not just adding an item to a database as a manufacturer and saying, okay, great, we're done.
Well,
There's a
there's
lot.
no marketing too. I mean, say you do put in 5,000 products and it's great. You just sent over to XYZ contractor software. You just uploaded 5,000 products. In our experience, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, that they're not going to start sending out emails to people and saying, hey, update your databases because Martin's Electric just put in 5,000 new products. Nobody's doing that for them. So now the products are there, but the contractor might not know that they've been added. And now they're not getting these products used because nobody's told them it's there. They're not looking for it. And they're just going to continue on with what they're doing because we're humans and we take the easy route for the most part. And if nobody tells us something new and exciting is there, we're just going to keep going on with the old stuff that we used to use.
Right.
So, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of parts that can be done. And I hate sitting here name dropping what we do, but Bid Advantage fills a lot of those gaps when it comes to the estimating, the marketing, everything in between. And you're not having to do any of that heavy lifting, but it's just a piece. It's a piece in a bigger picture though, as you said. And we've been mentioning it over and over. And I want to say this multiple times so people understand it. It's great to get your products into these engineering programs. That's number one. That's where you want to be so you can be spec'd in. But what happens if you don't? Step number 2, Bid Advantage with Electric Smarts gets you insight into these databases, get your products in there. Number 3, you can do it on your own with your own regional guys, is checking your price files. How many of your distributors are connected to contractors through a pricing service like NetPricer? And if they are, how many products are in there? It seems like the logical 3 steps in this space that manufacturers should be looking at when they're working here, because it's not a small space. I mean, we're recording billions and billions of dollars each year through NetPricer from contractors that are getting products priced out. It's not a small amount.
No.
Well, it's been fun. How about we do this next week?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We will be back on another recap in 3 weeks, but you can catch another episode next week. Please make sure to subscribe so that you get up-to-date information every week when we're dropping our new episodes. So thanks for joining us. Take care.